What unfolded in early January did not arrive with spectacle or noise. It did not announce itself through breaking news banners or urgent declarations. Instead, it emerged quietly, almost discreetly, in the form of an interview that at first glance appeared restrained, even ordinary. Yet beneath its calm surface lay words that carried unusual weight. Words that did not seek attention, but commanded it. Words that refused to remain private reflections and instead became a signal to anyone willing to listen carefully. On January 8, an interview with Marian Eleganti, Auxiliary Bishop Emeritus, was published. There was no dramatic staging, no provocative tone, no attempt to inflame emotions. The bishop spoke slowly, carefully, with a clarity that was unsettling precisely because it was so composed. He did not attack. He did not posture. He simply observed. And what he observed touched something deep within the Church, something many have sensed but few have dared to articulate openly. Eleganti is not a figure on the margins. He is not an outsider critiquing the Church from a distance, nor a dissenter seeking influence through controversy. He is someone formed within the Church's life, shaped by her liturgy, her theology, her discipline, and her long memory. His words carry weight because they come from within, from someone who knows how the Church functions, how her teaching authority is meant to operate, and how fragile trust can become when clarity falters. If you haven't subscribed, click on the subscribe button so you don't miss out on future videos like this, because what you're about to hear is not just news, it's a wake-up call for every heart that still believes truth should burn brighter than silence. Now grab your rosary, quiet your spirit, and let your heart listen, not just with ears, but with faith. The heart of his concern is not about style, tone, or pastoral preferences. It is not about whether certain initiatives are popular or unpopular. It goes far deeper than that. At the center of his diagnosis is the coherence of the Magisterium itself. The very principle that ensures the Church teaches consistently across time, safeguarding continuity between what was taught yesterday, what is taught today, and what will be taught tomorrow. This is not an abstract concern. The Magisterium exists precisely to guard what has been handed down, not to reinvent it. It is meant to provide clarity, stability, and confidence. When it speaks, the faithful should recognize the same voice they have always known, developing, deepening, responding to new circumstances, but never contradicting itself. Eleganti is careful to acknowledge that debate has always existed in the Church. From the earliest centuries, disagreements, tensions, and theological disputes have shaped the Church's intellectual life. That reality is not new, and it is not inherently dangerous. What troubles him is something he describes as unprecedented, signs of internal inconsistency emerging not from the fringes, but from within the very structures charged with preserving doctrinal unity. He points to dicasteries, official documents, and subsequent clarifications that seem to require further clarifications. A pattern in which teaching no longer appears as a clear, stable line, but as something provisional, adjustable, and at times internally strained. The issue is not that questions are being asked, but that answers seem increasingly ambiguous. Doctrine, by its nature, is not meant to feel unstable. It is not meant to leave priests, bishops, and the faithful unsure of where the Church stands. When teaching becomes vague, a space opens, an empty space where uncertainty begins to grow. And uncertainty, once introduced, does not remain neutral. It spreads. Priests begin to wonder how to preach with confidence. Bishops struggle to guide their flocks with clarity. Lay Catholics find themselves asking whether what was taught as true in the past still holds today. These questions do not remain theoretical. They affect prayer, sacramental life, moral decision-making, and trust in ecclesial authority. Once that trust begins to erode, the consequences are profound. This is why Eleganti's words are not merely critical. They are protective. He is not calling for revolution or novelty. He is calling for continuity. For the Church to speak with a voice that is recognizable as her own. For teaching that does not need constant explanation in order to avoid misunderstanding. In this context, he speaks about the need to correct certain documents, not to alter doctrine, but to rescue it from ambiguity. The word correction is not used as a weapon, but as a remedy. When formulations obscure what has always been taught, remaining silent is not an act of mercy. It is a failure of responsibility. Silence, in such cases, allows confusion to deepen and trust to weaken. What makes his intervention striking is its restraint. He does not dramatize. He does not exaggerate. He simply states that, in his view, the Church has never faced a situation quite like this before. That statement alone carries enormous weight. The Church has survived persecution, schism, heresy, and internal conflict across centuries. And yet, this moment feels different, not because of pressure from outside, but because confusion seems to arise from within. As the interview unfolds, a deeper emotion becomes apparent beneath the analysis. A quiet sorrow. A concern that the thread connecting the Church's past, present, and future is being stretched thin. Not broken, but strained. Those who love the Church most deeply are often the first to feel such tension, precisely because they are attuned to her inner coherence. This concern becomes more concrete when Eleganti turns to specific documents. Once the issue is named, it cannot remain abstract. Examples become unavoidable. Among them, one document stands out as a focal point of controversy and concern, Fiducia Supplicans. To understand why this document matters so much, it is essential to understand the nature of the resistance it provoked. The reaction was not driven by emotional outrage or reactionary panic. It was not blind rebellion against authority. Instead, it took the form of articulated dissent grounded in theological reasoning. Bishops, priests, scholars, and faithful Catholics raised objections not because they rejected the Church, but because they feared for her doctrinal coherence. This distinction is crucial. Dissent rooted in pride seeks rupture. Dissent rooted in fidelity seeks continuity. Eleganti insists that the resistance to Fiducia Supplicans belongs to the latter category. The objections were not about optics or public relations. They were about the theological foundation of the document itself. According to the analysis he presents, the document lacks sufficient doctrinal grounding to support the implications that flow from it. In simple terms, the pastoral suggestions it contains do not rest securely on what the Church has consistently taught. When pastoral practice moves ahead of doctrinal clarity, confusion is inevitable. And in matters involving blessing, morality, and sacramental language, that confusion spreads quickly. This helps explain why the reaction was global. Bishops from different continents responded not with slogans, but with reasoned arguments. They were not rejecting authority. They were appealing to it, asking how the document aligns with the Church's perennial teaching. Eleganti suggests that this question has not been adequately answered. What followed only reinforced the sense of instability. After the document's release came clarifications. Then further explanations. Then attempts to scale down expectations. Cardinal Fernandez intervened to reinterpret and soften aspects of the text. But instead of resolving the tension, this sequence revealed it more clearly. If a document must be repeatedly explained in order to prevent misunderstanding, something has already gone wrong. Doctrine is meant to illuminate. It should not require ongoing damage control. Eleganti identifies this pattern: step forward, step back, clarify the clarification, as deeply troubling. Not because truth has changed, but because initial formulations lacked precision. And in doctrine, precision is not optional. It is a duty. Alongside Fiducia Supplicans, another text enters the discussion, Fiducia Popularis Fidelis. While less controversial on the surface, it is not immune to similar risks. The concern here is not devotion itself. The Church's devotional life has always been rich and varied. The concern is interpretation. Without a reading firmly grounded in tradition, even well-intentioned texts can contribute to ambiguity. Small fractures rarely cause immediate collapse. They accumulate quietly. Over time, the line that once felt solid begins to blur. This is the deeper anxiety running through Eleganti's reflections. Not fear of change, but fear of drift. When clarity fades, confidence erodes. Authority weakens not because it is rejected, but because it becomes uncertain. This is why he insists that the Magisterium cannot afford vagueness. Not now. Not ever. Clarity is not rigidity. It is an act of charity. Souls depend on it. A priest at the altar must know what he stands for. A believer kneeling before the Eucharist must trust that today's teaching will not quietly contradict yesterday's. Continuity is not nostalgia. It is fidelity. And fidelity is what has held the Church together across centuries. Without it, documents multiply while meaning dissolves. Eleganti does not accuse individuals or speculate about motives. He diagnoses a pattern. And patterns matter more than intentions, because even good intentions can produce harmful outcomes when clarity is sacrificed. The tension he describes is not between progress and tradition, but between coherence and confusion. Between a teaching authority that speaks with one voice and one that requires constant translation. The interview does not resolve this tension. It names it. And once named, it cannot be unseen. This commitment to clarity becomes even more evident when Eleganti turns to the topic of interreligious dialogue. Here, his language grows more direct, not out of hostility, but out of realism. He rejects what he sees as a sugar-coated narrative that ignores profound incompatibilities. Using a stark image, he says he is not naive enough to believe that water and fire can coexist. This is not a rejection of dialogue itself, but a rejection of illusion. The illusion that deep theological differences can be erased through goodwill alone. He argues that the crescent moon religion, from its origins, has embodied an anti-Christian posture and an ambition for domination. These are strong words, unfashionable and uncomfortable, but spoken deliberately as historical and theological judgments rather than political provocations. Once again, the concern is not dialogue, but naivety. Dialogue that denies reality becomes denial. Authentic dialogue must begin with truth, with an honest acknowledgement of incompatibilities. Pretending otherwise does not build peace, it weakens witness. A church uncertain of her own doctrine cannot speak clearly to the world. Eleganti's vision is not one of withdrawal or aggression, but integrity. Speak clearly. Stand firmly. Engage honestly. Never at the cost of truth. This principle unites his reflections on doctrinal documents and interreligious relations alike. Doctrine must remain the binding criterion, not ambiguity, compromise, or shifting interpretations. Doctrine is not an obstacle to compassion, it is its foundation. He speaks not as someone attacking the Church, but as someone calling her to responsibility to the faithful, to history, and to the truth entrusted to her care. The interview ends without dramatic conclusions, but with an implicit appeal: return to clarity, return to continuity, return to confidence. Not confidence in strategies or narratives, but in the truth that does not change. Because when the Church speaks clearly, she does not divide, she heals. And when she hesitates, the world does not wait. It fills the silence with its own meanings. That is why voices like Marian Eleganti's matter, not because they are loud, but because they are precise. They remind us that silence is not always humility, and that clarity is not cruelty. For those who love the Eucharist, who trust the Magisterium, and who long for a church that speaks with one voice rooted in centuries of faith, this moment is not about fear. It is about discernment. And discernment begins, always, with listening. If this message touched your heart, like this video and share your thoughts in the comment Amen and stay with us. More Eucharistic stories, deeper reflections, and holy insights are on the way. May Christ in the Eucharist be your light, your rest, your truth. Amen.